typically, RJ, ascended masters aren't recognized as such until after their incarnation, which is something that you stated in the book. Why is this so? Why do so many people fail to realize that they're in the presence of a master until, afterwards? It feels like no one is appreciated until they've passed away, right?
Before you enjoy the video, if you want to purchase some of my never before released meditations, click on the pinned comment below. Oh, you don't know what you got till it's gone, right? A lot of truth in that. So I would say for the most part, there's a couple of reasons. One is we talked about this earlier. We can't really understand anything other than at the level that we're at. So, masters do keep reincarnating over and over, contrary to if someone thinks they don't, they do. They keep showing up. But again, we can't really see them for who and what they are because we can only understand things at the level that we're at. So that's number one. Also, because of the way that ascended masters tend to, not always, tend to operate, we kind of would need to sort of step back and then look at their entire body of work over, let's say, a lifetime. And it's through maybe a couple of 100 years, and we look back and we see what that being accomplished, provided, left here, what they were able to do with themselves and information and these kind of things. It's at that point with a little space and a little distance and an entire body of work, we're like, oh, well, that's obviously that was an ascended master. But most of the time while they're actually working here, we don't recognize them as such. And also, most of the time, an authentic ascended master is not operating at the forefront. Very few have very front-facing lifetimes. So most of them are working behind the scenes, and it's eventually those teachings just wound up spreading, and then we see a larger and larger. Paramahansa Yogananda is still having a massive, massive effect on our planet and other planets, by the way, but a massive, massive effect on our planet. And he left his body in 1951. And so now he's pretty much universally recognized as an ascended master, which he is. She absolutely is. So we need the body of work. We need a little space. And also we can't really, and the other thing is, the last thing is that we've conceptualized what an ascended master is, right? They should be floating, right? Wearing robes. And sometimes they do, right? But we've conceptualized what they should be or what they are. And those are just thoughts that has nothing to do with what an ascended master is or how they operate. And if we have this huge concept of what they are, we could be talking to one and we wouldn't even be able to recognize it because we just have this concept of what an ascended master should be or what they're like. But you'll know them by their work. That's how you know. If someone is authentically an ascended master, the proof will be in their work. They should be doing, or they will be doing, extraordinary things with themselves. Healing abilities is one of the biggest giveaways, to put themselves back together and these kind of things. Accessing information that is so far, far beyond the intellect. Depending upon the timeline and depending upon what is going on, ascended masters will not make themselves a target. So what does that mean? Okay, so they won't necessarily be walking around levitating. They won't necessarily be teleporting themselves because they would just become a target. So ascended masters will keep online, so to speak. There are certain talents and abilities that are less overt in order to protect themselves so they can have the incarnation that they need and so they don't become a target. And also because some of those talents and abilities that would garner a lot of attention, that is one way to develop personhood or an egoic character based upon all the attention that one could get through doing magic or levitating or whatever. So they will, even though they can do it, they will turn those things off and not do it so they don't draw attention, and therefore also potentially develop an egoic character based upon all the adulation and attention that they would get.
Very interesting. And so, RJ, you said that they take like a back seat with regards to not being as forward facing. So I guess that there's still things that they're able to accomplish here just they wouldn't necessarily need to touch as many lives, or
Yeah, that's exactly right. So sometimes we have this concept of an ascended master that everyone on the planet would know of them during the incarnation, right? That almost never ever happens. And it's a little different now with the population that we have on the planet. So I can tell you that way back in Lemuria and Atlantis, and there were multiple ascended masters typically incarnated at the same time. Those ascended masters would speak to the entire world. That absolutely took place, so 100%. So now it would be a little difficult because what connects us would be our telepathic powers, but those are turned off because we rely on technology too much. But so for us, it would be the internet. So a real master who's on the internet, they would not get promoted. So in other words, they are most likely not supported by the algorithm. So it would be the opposite. So they wouldn't have 40 million followers, and they wouldn't their message and their vibration would not be emanating the entire internet, because they are a destroyer of the matrix. They are a creator of a new civilization. So they would be shadow banned. They would be not promoted. The algorithm would not support them. So there's various reasons why, but they don't have to be at the forefront. Their mere presence here changes everything.
2 more questions for you, RJ. Ascended masters, you said this in the book, have a high frequency bubble that they build around themselves while they're incarnate. I believe you said it was a Merkaba. Is that something that anyone can do, or is it not necessary for anyone to do?
Well, through practice, I mean, like anything else, we get good at what we do repetitively. So through practice, we could do this. Now they do it because it's the best way that they can maintain their normal level of functionality, is by creating a very an environment, literally an environment around them that's a very high frequency bubble, so they can continue to operate in a high frequency way. So the example we could use is like a spaceship. So aliens, traversing back and forth, inside the spaceship is going to be an environment that's conducive to them operating normally. Right. So whatever that environment is for them, that's normal. The spaceship will have that environment so they can operate normally. So an ascended master, when they incarnate into the lower frequency of the physical universe, they will literally build I call it a Vimana. People can look that up if you want, but you can think of a Merkaba. They would literally build that spaceship around them made of just pure energy. And so that way they can stay within a very, very high frequency environment, so they can operate in a very, very high frequency way because of this Merkaba, or the Vimana that they built around themselves, and therefore not succumb to the low frequencies of the physical universe. So it's like they're in this high frequency bubble because they're high frequency beings, and that way they can operate in a low frequency in a high frequency way by having that bubble around them.
Got you. So if we're going to talk about analogies, I know you love analogies, RJ, kind of like how Sandy in SpongeBob was able to survive under the sea because she had the bubble of right, RJ?
I'm not that familiar, or as familiar as you are, with SpongeBob. So
she was a squirrel that lived underneath the sea, though, and she had a bubble which basically allowed her to get oxygen. But yeah,
that sounds right. But yeah, the bubble, the protective. So think of a diving bell for a deep sea diver, right. So that pressure of that water, they would just get crushed, right? They wouldn't even be able to live, let alone function, right? So they encapsulate themselves in that diving bell, and then they could operate how they normally do on land, how they normally do. They can operate that way and still be, just numbers, 2,000 feet under the water, or within the water, or whatever the number is, but they can now operate normally. So it could very well be that squirrel that you're talking about, but a diving bell is another very human analogy that we can think of. Yeah.
RJ, you specifically told me that watching SpongeBob was necessary for enlightenment. So that's why I'm just kidding.
That's something I would say. So yeah, I believed you for a second there. Yeah.
Last question for you, RJ. You talk a lot about the OG Ascended Masters. Does that mean that there are new Ascended Masters that?
Yeah. So, okay. So ascended and again, chapter 2 is the real reference point to go to in the book. The old school OGs, the old school ascended masters, there's 13 of them. And so it's the 12 Elohim, our God being one of the Elohim, and then there's 11 other gods, and then there's what created the gods, which is what the Hindu masters call the absolute, or the all there is. And Paramahansa Yogananda is from the absolute, or all there is, and the ascended masters are from these other 12 Elohim, including our God. So there are 13 original OGs from each one of the gods and the absolute, or the all there is, and each one comes from a different god. But there are also, I mean, the number I get is somewhere like around 36 to 40. There are some other ascended masters that have evolved themselves through, I'll say through the evolutionary process of incarnation. So in other words, they didn't start out that way. So I would offer up that these old school ascended masters were already that evolved. They were already created with a supreme level of sentience, love and wisdom, whose subsets are talents and abilities. And then they learned how to hone that and utilize that through incarnations, through human and alien incarnations. But they were already created from the get-go at that level. So there's probably another three, yeah, it's about 40 is what it feels like to me. So there's about 40 other beings besides those 13 that through incarnation, numerous incarnations, they have mastered themselves and become an ascended master. So I would not just consider them old school, which doesn't matter, but I just wouldn't consider them old school ascended masters. These are ones that have done it through the process of incarnation and evolving themselves. But it is also a bit of a misnomer when we say ascended. The last interview that I did with George on Coast to Coast, someone called up, not with a question, just to say, well, ascended masters don't incarnate. They don't ever incarnate. They're ascended. They don't ever come here, this and that. And so I took the liberty of stating what my direct experience is in regards to that even though the label is ascended, but they continually incarnate here. They continually incarnate here and other systems of worlds. So they are ascended. They don't need to. It is not required for their evolution. They never needed to for their own evolution, but they choose to do so because it is a way that they can be of service. So there's kind of those old school ones, and those are the ones that I really talk about in the book. Those are the true timeless teachers of humanity. And then there's another roughly 40 beings that have become an ascended master. And those ascended masters also choose. They're like the ultimate free agents. They come and go as they please. They have evolved themselves to the point that they're outside of the evolutionary cycle through incarnation. So they simply do so as a way to be of service. And so there's those two different categories, the OGs and the ones that have done it in this sense more recently through incarnations.